The UAE appears to be determined to expand its ties with the Israel regime. On Tuesday, a plane carrying Emirati government officials took off from the UAE capital Abu Dhabi and landed in Ben Gurion Airport outside Tel Aviv hours later. They were accompanied by U.S. officials including Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and U.S. Special Representative for International Negotiations Avi Berkowitz. According to official reports, Emiratis now do not need permit to enter Israeli-occupied territories due to a visa exemption agreement reached with the Tel Aviv regime. The announcement was made by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu following the arrival of the Emirati delegation in Tel Aviv. The delegation is also signing deals on cooperation in aviation, investment, science and technology. The UAE economy is under tremendous strain, suffering huge GDP losses.
Yeah, it's a quid pro quo here. The UAE and Israel, as we know, have always been economic and political allies. It's just becoming more clear now. Now, Israel's end of the bargain is that it maintains the United States' support as the United States is expanding a military base in the Middle East.
It appears the UAE is normalizing its business ties with Israel and in exchange giving the Tel Aviv regime the chance to gain a foothold in the Persian Gulf. The UAE ratified its normalization deal signed in a White House ceremony last month on Monday. According to reports, the Emirati delegation presented a letter to the Israeli side officially requesting the establishment of an embassy in Israel, in the expectation of Israel doing the same in Abu Dhabi.
Because it's not in the UAE's interest. The UAE's interest is in maintaining its ruling elite that is allied militarily, historically, and economically with the Saudi royal family, Bahrain's Khalifa regime, and by default, the Western governments of Britain and the United States.
So since the announcement of the establishment of diplomatic ties between Israel and the UAE, there was supposed to be a halt in Israel's illegal settlement expansion. Yet the regime said it's pushing ahead with plans to expand settlements by as much as 5,500 new units. So some believe Israel never intended to stop its settlement activities. And let's not forget that the UAE and Israel have had clandestine dealings with one another for years. So why both have decided to announce this normalization at this time is believed to be the result of U.S. President Donald Trump's push to get some points before this come November 3rd election.
Palestinian officials have reacted angrily to the UAE delegation's visit to Israel. Palestine Liberation Organization said the visit simply encourages Israel to step up its aggression against Palestinians. Hamas resistance movement has also slammed the visit, saying it simply gives the Israelis the green light to annex more Palestinian lands.
Unfortunately, this visit comes at a time of an increasing number of decisions to approve more settlements and the beginning of a gradual annexation in the West Bank. Such a visit will only encourage the occupation to commit more crimes, settlements and the annexation.
Since normalization deals were signed between the UAE, Bahrain and Israel, the Tel Aviv regime has approved more settlement units on Palestinian lands. Earlier this month, the Tel Aviv regime announced the construction of nearly 5,000 new units. After it concluded its deal with the Israeli regime, the UAE falsely claimed that Tel Aviv would in return halt plans for the annexation of occupied Palestinian lands. Shortly later, Tel Aviv denied that claim. The fresh settlement constructions have been slammed by the international community, the Arab League and UN officials. More than 600,000 Israelis live in over 230 settlements built since the 1967 Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories of the West Bank and East Jerusalem al-Quds.
Now, Israel's end of the bargain is to be able to completely expand its settlement expansion and annexation of the West Bank, and the UAE for its own economic and political incentives and purposes, has no reason to really be outraged over it.
Since U.S. President Donald Trump took office in December 2016, Israel has stepped up its illegal settlement construction activities in defiance of UN Security Council Resolution 2334. All Israeli settlements are illegal under international law as they are built on occupied land.